Okay, welcome, Mr. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Kwacha.
So, you came to CTK 2 years ago now, hey?
That's right.
How has your experience been?
Well, I opened up the school in Drayton Valley, right? And
And
it,
that would be Holy Trinity Academy.
yes,
Okay.
and it was kind of my baby, right?
Yeah.
Because I also went to different schools to see how we could open and develop this school. So leaving it was kind of bittersweet, but the drive and the commute,
Hmm.
right, is now from an hour and 10 minutes down to 8 minutes.
Oh, you
And
live in Leduc?
I live in Leduc,
Okay.
yeah. And so that was a big benefit as well. But certainly, there's a lot of negatives.
For a guy who shows up here at like, I don't know, 3:30 in the morning, what time is it
Well,
you get?
5:30 in the morning, not 3:30. That's crazy talk,
Yeah,
right? I might be up at
yeah,
3:30.
that's when you wake up.
That's when I wake up. It's crazy
Hmm.
to come at 3:30.
You
No,
don't
5:30 in the morning.
you don't just teleport here directly, hey?
No, no, no.
Okay.
I kind of have coffee. I kind of put the vehicle in cruise control, and it finds my way here in the morning.
Okay.
But it's quiet time, and it's time that I
Hmm.
appreciate, right? When I can kind of plan and prep rather than have a chaotic day.
Hmm.
So,
When
but
you were at Holy Trinity driving down to Drayton Valley, were you also getting there at
yeah, I
5:30?
left at 4:30 to get there for about 5:30, quarter to 6
When do you
in
wake
the
up?
morning. Well, you kind of nailed it when you said about 3:30,
Okay.
3:30, right? But creature of habit, just what I've always done, right? I've always been a morning person.
3:30 is beyond but much before
Well,
morning.
I was in the restaurant business before I was teaching, and you
Okay.
had strange hours because we work in banquets, and they'd be
Yeah,
1 or 2
yeah,
in the
yeah.
morning. They have to break down the
Yeah.
banquet and stuff. So, right, that kind of kept me there. But it's just I found it wasted time to sleep. Right. I
Hmm.
know a lot of people like that, right? And there's
Hmm.
a moment where I think about retirement and I could just starfish till about 10 in the morning, right? In my king size bed while the wife's working.
Yeah.
And right, but then I can't, right?
Hmm.
And of course my cat gets me up too, so gotta
Okay,
keep the
okay.
cat.
So when do you go to bed then? Like when are you asleep?
Well, probably about 9:30-ish, right? It's been a good time.
Okay, so you're probably getting 6, 7 hours of sleep a night
Yeah,
still.
yeah,
Okay.
and sometimes it's straight through the night.
Yeah.
Sometimes the
Yeah.
cat wakes up, or sometimes
Oh.
being an old guy like myself, right? You
Hmm.
have urges that you have
Hmm.
to take care
Hmm.
of at night and stuff like that. So it is what it
That's
is.
fair, right? It's
Yeah.
part of life.
But
Hmm.
that morning time, right? Because I know some people stay until 4 or 5 prepping at the end of the day, but that's never been my right
Hmm.
kind of methodology. It's always been right. Hey, three
Hmm.
thirty, 4 o'clock. But if a student wants me to stay, right, I'll certainly help them. That gives me a chance to kind of help them too,
Hmm.
right, at the end of the day. So
Okay. So you were part of the process of opening up Holy Trinity. What year was that then?
we opened up in 2009.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
pretty recent. Yeah.
St. A's was a K to 12 school, and we found we were losing a lot of students, right, from grade 9 to 10 to the public high school. So
Hmm.
they put a move in. I thought it was rare to get that because we only had 90 kids,
Hmm.
right, for the new school, and the school cost $12 million to build. Now, though, of course, they're eking up that 260 student mark there as well. So it was a good call, and
Okay.
a lot of the students that now have another option besides going to the public school,
Yeah.
right? And we do get a lot of students that come in
And I'm assuming that K to 12 is now K to 9,
K to 8.
K to 8.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're at
Okay.
9 to 12, or HD
Okay.
is 9 to 12. Yeah,
Okay.
which was an easy transition coming here because it's 9 to
Hmm.
12 at CTK as well.
Hmm. Okay. So 2 years ago, you make that switch. You drop your commute from like 2 hours and 20 minutes to about maybe 20 minutes on a busy
That's right.
day. What do you do with all that extra time?
Well, I'd like to think that I go home and cook meals for my wife, but I don't, right? She does. Right? Basically, it's
You
kind of
call, honey, 8 minutes.
right.
8 minutes. I'm leaving right now. I'm in the car.
Right. And again, I was a chef beforehand, so you'd
Yeah.
think so, but I kind of got out of the foods industry for a reason. I kind of lost the passion right for that. So she still does the cooking, but I pretty much do almost everything else, right? Mow the lawn, vacuum, right?
Hmm.
Laundry, right? Those kind of things, right? I don't
Hmm.
mind, right?
Hmm.
Kind of picking up the slack there, clean out the cat box, which I did this morning. It's like, yeah. So I mean,
Hmm.
there are things that keep me amused.
Okay.
And because I usually think about how in this hour and a half before my wife comes home, how I could work out and lose weight. So that takes a lot of energy to think about
To
and to
ponder,
ponder that.
ponder
Yeah.
what
So
you could be doing.
yeah. So to
Yeah.
actually put it in action would be a lot more work. So I have to
Yeah.
really kind of think about, do I really want to put in this hour and a half
Yeah.
workout?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Mm.
So you mentioned you were a chef, and I know we've talked. You used to be a manager of
Yeah, Red
Red Robin.
Robin,
Okay.
yeah, restaurants.
Okay. What
Yeah.
so let's go back to, Mr. Olson. He's 18 years old. He just finished high school.
Yeah, I had a
Well,
call from my best friend, and he goes, "Randy, what do you want to do in life?" I had no idea.
your
We
best
got two
friend is the
months.
same age as you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have 2 months, right? Because he's called me in April. He said, "What about going to NATE to culinary arts?"
Mhm.
Never thought of it before, right? I said, "Sure." So I filled an application form, found out that they only take 60 positions, and there were 600 applications in. So we got incredibly lucky,
Okay.
right, for that to happen.
That
So
that's a steep cutoff. They only take 10% of
yeah,
applicants. Or at least
exactly.
that year they took 10%.
Because they have
Yeah.
5 sections in culinary arts, 12 students per section.
Hmm.
That's what they hold it down to.
Yeah.
So 60 students per year. It's a 2-year course. So me and my best friend, right, got an apartment with a third party in Edmonton, and
Hmm.
for the first month and a half, it was pretty good. But at the very beginning, my brother was killed in a car accident, and that kind of took me on this spiraling kind of path of depression. And my other two roommates couldn't understand why I was right in that
Yeah.
position, so they kicked me out of the apartment.
That's a
Fortunately, my sister
terrible
was
thing
living
to
in
do.
Edmonton.
Yeah.
Um, we're 18, right?
Hmm.
If people think 18 is an adult, they're kidding themselves. So
Hmm.
it took about 2 or 3 years for my best friend to kind of have the courage to kind of call me up there, and I was just wanted to call him too, right? But we had to have that
Hmm.
mutual, and then it was like, yeah, it is what it is. Right. My sister was there. She took me in. Right. It was a wonderful experience. Right. We were kind of strengthening each other for
Hmm.
that tragedy.
Was your brother older, younger
Yeah.
than
He
you?
was two
Okay.
years older.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
your sister would be the oldest?
Yeah, and I've got another older brother as well,
Okay.
right? So
Oh, so
sister,
you're the
brother,
youngest
I
of
am the
four.
youngest. Yeah.
Does it go two sisters, brother, and you?
It goes a sister, brother, me, and I have two half sisters,
Okay. Okay.
and that in itself is a different story because
Yeah.
my parents swapped spouses with another couple.
This story is
So,
one of the wildest things I've
but
heard. Yeah.
yeah, and
But
it,
I've heard that
yeah.
like on the internet multiple times
Yeah,
that people just,
and again,
have the.
I consider my half sisters or my stepsisters my sisters because
Hmm.
it's not we never really left, right? We just stayed tight because both
Hmm.
parents,
Hmm.
right? We always did Christmases and we always did
Hmm.
celebrations and stuff together as well. So for me, it was
Okay.
just gaining two extra sisters,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Older,
Okay.
right? But yeah, so that was good. So went to Nate. My friend, he dropped out of culinary arts. Wasn't for him. I kind of stuck it out. It was good focus
You
for
were
me.
able to finish the program
I did
despite
finish.
the personal
Yeah,
challenges. Okay. And
yeah,
then your friend dropped out.
yeah. He
Okay.
dropped out. Opened up a restaurant in, long story short, opened up a restaurant, Earl's in Red Deer. And then I got a call from a friend of mine who went to Nate with me, and he was as clever as they come. This guy here was just an immaculate chef, but
Hmm.
he also didn't stay in the business too long. Went back to Oliver, BC to have an orchard. Calls me up one day and says, "Randy, I'm going to Australia. Do you want to come?" Right. So he said, "We're going for about a year and to undertake that." So I said, sure. And I knew I couldn't save money. So I talked to my stepmom. I said, hey, if I give you my paychecks, can you put them in a bank account so I can't touch them?
Yeah.
Right. And she did that. And right.
That's good financial advice. Give it to a responsible adult,
That's right.
right?
Yeah. Because,
Let the money get saved before it even touches your bank
yeah,
account.
once again, you think 18, 19, you're an adult, but you're not.
Hmm.
Okay. Not in that strict sense of maturity because a lot of people don't understand the fiduciary or the financial.
Well, and I think especially like, if you're in school from 6 to 18, so many of your decisions are being made for you, right?
Yeah.
That once you turn 18, all of a sudden, like all the decisions are your own, and you've had probably little to no practice
Yes.
with doing that. And so, yeah, I agree in that sense. It's like by the time you're 18, for many people, that's their first time with like a large amount of responsibility or like a really mature type of responsibility,
I think
like
so.
what to do with, a paycheck.
Yeah. I think
Um,
it's important for them to have a job, right? Absolutely.
mhm,
But maybe even at that age, I'm going to have a job in grade 9 or grade 10, right? Maybe the parent should still, hey, take some money aside, right?
mhm,
For rent, like keep it
mhm,
for them, right? So they can't spend it, but have
mhm.
that because I know it was like I was like when I had a job when I was in grade. I just spent the money as soon as it came
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
It's like my
Now
money.
and now nowadays you spend it before it gets
Yeah.
there,
Well,
right?
the
Yeah.
average. I tell this to my class. The average Canadian is now 187% in debt, right? And again, this is not accidental, right? People know, right?
Mhm.
But they're spending too much. So I just kind
So
of put that
so
money
so
aside.
what does a paycheck look like number wise back then?
back then.
Yeah.
um,
You were working
I
full
was
time?
I was working full time, so at the restaurant I was making about 20,000 a year, which wasn't too bad, right?
Hmm.
For that as well. When I
That,
was
that
at
that's pretty sweet considering like starting teachers make 50, like
Yeah,
50 to
that wasn't too bad in
55,
the
right?
restaurant
Yeah.
industry, and it was Monday to Friday
Yeah.
because my position was kind of production receiver, shipper kind of
Okay. Okay.
person, and again morning kind of manager. So yeah, that was kind of
Okay.
great. It was cool. The hours were great.
Yeah. So you come out of high school or come out of Nate and you're making
Mhm.
20,000 a year. Was this kind of your first like real big time job or did you work
Yeah,
before that as
no,
well? Okay.
that was pretty much it. But I did work construction for a couple of years, right?
Okay.
For my brother-in-law, right, for his
Hmm.
company as well.
Hmm.
When I came back from Australia, I needed kind of a job right away, and he was
Hmm.
hiring, so right, went
Okay.
into the construction business.
So you finish your culinary program, you're probably 20.
Hmm.
Okay. Then you work a little bit as a chef. You open up the Earls in Red Deer. And when did you get offered to go to Australia
Well,
and
it would
when
have
did
been
you
two
actually go?
years after
Okay.
that, right?
Okay.
After
So
you opened up the
you'd be about
Earls,
22.
about 22.
Okay.
The person I went with was 5 years my senior, and
Okay.
again, very clever, very mature. So I said, yeah, I could hitch my star to his wagon, and went with him. And long story short, we traveled all through Australia. It took about 3 months. We bought a combi van, V-Dub combi van, and we kind of traveled through the outback and made our way to Perth, which is on the other side of
Yeah, yeah.
Australia.
That's a long drive.
And that was an
Yeah.
annoying travel. I don't know why my buddy stayed with me.
Yeah.
And he said, once we got to Perth, he goes, Randy, it doesn't seem like you're having much fun here,
Yeah.
right? So tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take off for a week to go south, right? You talk to this person that I had a contact with. She's kind of a therapist, but she's also a Hindu, right?
Yeah.
Offshoot
Yeah.
of a Hindu practitioner.
Okay.
Long story short, I talked with her for about 2.5 hours. It was only supposed to be about an hour, right? Because it cost $25. But she straightened me right out.
Hmm.
And it was kind of a catalyst, right? My time as well, because I came in and said I started to enjoy life a little bit more, right? Not be so, right,
Do, do
strong.
you do you recall that conversation or are you willing to share some of
Um,
what you
she,
learned? Because
she, she
that's
kind
so
of
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she kind of used some philosophy that we've heard before. Um, there's no right or wrong. Only
Hmm.
thinking makes it so,
Hmm.
right? Because I kind of took
Oh,
it on myself. Yes,
yeah, I
right.
understand. Yeah.
And of course from Hamlet, this above all, to thine own self be true,
Hmm.
right? So he goes, don't be so hard on yourself. Right. Don't
Hmm.
be so hard on yourself, right? Because you have, and I think part of this goes to my brother being killed, right? And trying to strive for something, right, more and not reaching it and being kind of bitter at the world as well.
Hmm.
So that was kind of for me, kind of straightened me out, right,
Okay.
a little bit.
Wow. So would you say that that 2.5 hour discussion kind of like altered the course of your
I
life,
think
maybe?
that and the fact we had another 3 or 4 months traveling, went to
Yeah.
Southeast Asia, and I saw things that you shouldn't see, right? Drugs being kind of right, little kids on drugs, and the
Okay.
back
Okay.
alleys, and people at the age of 90 with diseases still running rickshaws, and you kind
Hmm.
of see a different side of life.
You saw
Um,
like a lot of hardship almost
Yes,
in there.
and my
Okay.
buddy who I traveled with gave me his pictures, and he actually
Hmm.
took a picture of this sickly old man. He goes, Randy,
Hmm.
remember this when you think life is tough, right? And he kind of had this one guy, and he was all covered in sores, and he was sleeping in his rickshaw, right? There's no pension, there's no retirement for this person as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
Yeah, so that kind of opened my eyes to what the real world,
Hmm.
right, was, and to appreciate what I had.
Okay. So and you had this experience at roughly 22, 23 years
Yeah,
old. Okay.
yeah,
So that was very formative then. Yeah.
very much so.
Okay. So then you come back to Canada eventually.
Yep.
You work construction.
Yeah, came back with 11 cents in my pocket, right? My sister picked me up at the bus depot, but couldn't recognize me because I had lost 35 pounds.
Yeah.
And I was all tanned up, right?
Yeah.
I go, Brenda, yeah, right? She
Yeah.
looked
Yeah.
at me, just
It's like,
couldn't,
how did this
but yeah,
stranger know my name?
yeah, because now I'm back and fat and
Hmm.
right, and
I'm curious, what year would that have been then?
87.
Okay, so in terms of communicating with your family, right? Because like I I traveled as well. I was fortunate,
Mm-hmm.
roughly around the same
Yep.
age, but we had cell phones, so I could like video call my
Yeah.
mom and talk to her and be like, hey, like
It,
what's going
it
on back
was
at
a
home?
bone of contention because my buddy was getting letters all the time from his family. I wasn't getting any from mine, so I wrote a letter right to. I said, I'm kind of away from you guys for Christmas. I'm away from you for all these. I'm not getting anything in my, and all of a sudden they've kind of felt, okay, there's responsibility, right? So they started to write letters and we called, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
not easy because midnight in Perth is like 7 a.m. yesterday,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right
yeah.
here. So, but yeah, we kind of, that was kind of a
Okay,
catalyst too,
so
to staying in
you would have to
touch.
exchange letters
Hmm.
through mail and then
Yeah.
kind of let them
And
know where you were gonna
telegrams,
go.
aerograms, which are a little bit faster, but you only had a certain amount that you could write on an
Yeah,
aerogram. Yeah. Let them know
yeah,
where it's
that's
at.
a foreign technology to me.
It
Yeah,
was, yeah, it was
it must have been
an
pretty advanced at the
experience.
time.
At the
Yeah,
time, yeah, it
yeah,
was
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
handy. Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, okay. So you come back home, your sister doesn't recognize you, and you go to work construction. So what do you do between 23 and then like the next few years? What did you get up to?
My brother,
That's fine. Leave that in there.
yeah, my brother was actually a stuntman in Vancouver, but it didn't work out. He did about 3 or 4 years, had a few movies that he
Okay.
did, came back to Edmonton. So me and him got an apartment together.
Yeah.
He brought one of his partners back with her, and she stayed with us for a while. So we worked in construction together for a bit. And then I got a job managing Red
Hmm.
Robin restaurants for 5.5 years. Right.
Okay.
Met my first wife in the restaurant.
Hmm.
Right. She was just a new hire,
Hmm.
and right.
So you were
So
25 when you got that roughly,
yeah,
and you did it till about 30.
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
that's right. And then
How was your experience in that? Like, I
it was great. It was a wonderful experience.
because we've talked a bit about that,
Yeah.
and you mentioned how like it kind of that managerial aspect teaches you like what do you look for in a person, whether or not they're
Yes.
hireable, right?
Yeah.
What were some things you noted? Like, oh, this person you noted like, hey, they have this, and this. Let's hire them, and they actually ended up being quality
Yes,
employees in
exactly.
this
But you could also
situation.
tell by
Yeah.
body language,
Yeah.
right? The first 4 or 500 applications, you're just kind of fitting in. But when you get to your 2 and 3 thousandth, you can tell a person's body language in about 30 seconds.
Hmm.
And I came down and I tell my students that in comm class. I said, I can probably tell within 23 seconds looking at your resume, looking at a person, if they're a quality person
Hmm.
as well. So the
Hmm.
resume is just an after effect of looking at experience, but I look at the quality of
Hmm.
character and you're able
So,
to kind
so,
of pick that up.
so what would you notice? Let's say.
If they slouched, if they
Yeah.
looked away from me, I'm not
Yeah.
going to hire
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah.
But if they're really interested and curious,
Huh.
right? Generally, I've been right, but there's one time I was absolutely wrong,
Hmm.
and that has stuck in my mind. And this was way back in Earl's
Hmm.
when I was supervising, and there was a person that really struggled. Right, really struggled to kind of learn the recipes and kind of getting, and he was making mistakes. And I thought, I'm not sure. And then when I came back from Australia, I found out he's now managing the restaurant, right? So again, somebody took the patience with him
Hmm.
and right became a good asset. And I kind of learned that in Red Robin. I said, yeah, let's give a person a little bit of a chance,
Hmm.
right? Before, but
Was that person managing the Earl as well?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. It wasn't just like
No,
what
no,
do they call it?
they
Failing forward.
no, no, they rose above that.
Yeah. Okay. That's
And
awesome.
again,
Yeah.
right, I think we did some pretty good hiring at
Hmm.
restaurants because, I mean, you invest a lot, right?
Hmm.
Professionally and personally.
That's something I try to talk about in my class. Like, it's expensive to train someone, and
Thousands.
if they make a mistake, right?
Yeah,
Like, let's say they damage some deep fryer, or like damage some sort of equipment, like you could be spending 10,000, right?
right.
So often, like in class, when we have the discussion around like minimum wage, hiring young adults, hiring teenagers, it's like, okay, like if it's $15 an hour to for them to work and all the training, why would they hire a 14-year-old, right?
Yeah,
And so we kind of have that discussion, and that's something that kids have never heard. Like, oh yeah, it does cost money for the person who's hiring me to train me.
yeah.
You're a liability until you're not, right? And that for some people that's 1 week. Some people that might be 6 months, right, or 3 months, right, whatever the probationary period is. So,
it was that kind of thinking that got me into teaching because I would
hmm.
hire 14 and 15-year-olds. They'd start in the dishwashing area and then move up to right
Hmm.
cook to if they saw that you
Give
had the
them the
maturity.
least amount of responsibility. Yeah,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
I think that is the most important
yeah,
dishwasher because nothing happens if you don't have your dishes going out there. So to
yeah,
me,
yeah.
and anytime there is an issue, anytime I got off the line, I went back to help the dishwashers rather
Hmm.
than help expedite the food, right?
Hmm.
Because we need to have the stuff there. So I think they saw that, right? Said, no, no, this is a key area. And anytime somebody showed aptitude, I'd say, well, would you like to? be a cook? Would you like to
Mm-hmm.
go on the line?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, definitely. My first wife noticed this. Goes, "Wow, you training," and that's the whole it comes down to, right? You train for about 2 or 3 weeks, and you make sure that they kind of dot the i's and cross the t's. And she goes, "You really do a good job, and there's really no questions. Maybe you should think of becoming a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at that same level, perhaps of education that you could take into the
Mm-hmm.
education field, and from then, right? Because again, I wasn't loving what I was doing in the restaurant industry. I kind of lost the passion for that." And it kind of clicked. I go, "Oh." But
Mm-hmm.
then I said, you realize I didn't graduate. I only had 99 credits. I didn't have 100. You only need, right, grade
Yeah.
10 to get into culinary arts school. She goes, "Well, you can upgrade." So there I am thinking,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, I got to upgrade. I got to manage a restaurant by day and upgrade at night school. But it was important to me, and I decided to do chemistry. Right
Mm-hmm.
at that time, it was Chem 10, 20, and 30, and it's like, whew, that's a bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But again, right, it was important to me. Made it through, and
Mm-hmm.
right, managed to get into
Okay.
university.
How do you like? I'm assuming you were probably training people one to one.
That's right.
How did so when I guess I mean you've been teaching for how many years now?
27.
27. So over the 27 years, I mean classroom sizes have grown a lot larger, I would assume.
Um,
I don't know how much that
Different
would have been.
dynamics, of course. My first year was up in the Arctic, right, teaching in the
Yeah.
territories, and I had all the grade high schools in one class. It was like going back old school. I had the
Yeah.
10s in 2 rows, 11s in 2 rows, and there was only a couple of 12s. And you'd kind of differentiate the
Mm-hmm.
learning that way. Small little community, only 17 high school students, so manageable, but still you're up different levels because some might be taking a Chem 20 and some might be taking a Science 24 or
Mm-hmm.
14. So you really kind of balance that. That was really,
You were teaching sciences.
yeah, the only thing I wasn't teaching was high school math because I didn't feel comfortable with that,
Okay. Okay.
right? So, and it's more facilitating because you used
Mm-hmm.
a distance learning material and you gave that to the
Yeah.
students and focused on that. But it was a good experience.
How did you find the switch from like teaching people one to one to, because classroom, it's sometimes very difficult to get one to one, especially if you have 30 or more
Hmm.
kids, right?
Hmm.
How did you find that transition?
Um, yeah, that's difficult. I usually leave it up to the students if they want the help,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's a great thing about high school and stuff like that, right? Tell them, hey, if you guys want help, right, one
Mm-hmm.
on one, we can do that. But I've got a class of 30 students, right? I can't seek you out.
Mm-hmm.
You have to seek me out.
Yeah.
And they'll ask me, I said, yeah, you can come see me before school. You can come see me at lunch or after school, right? If you want a little bit more one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
right? Kind of. And yeah, there's the strong students, the students that really kind of see that have that maturity certainly will take advantage and say,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Olson, how to make this 60 into a 70,
Yeah.
right? And go through that process. But
Okay. Okay.
again, right, that's up to a student, right?
Yeah.
To come. I think that's where their self-directed comes.
Do you prefer kind of being in front of the classroom or do you prefer that one-on-one kind of working with students,
Um,
working with individuals?
Yeah, it's in the classroom. In front of the
Okay.
classroom, I think I shine. I think there's sort of a university professor in me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Kind of mentality,
Mm-hmm.
right, towards that. Knock wood, but there's been a lot of students said they'd like this, right? Because it's not quite the tedium of doing a whole bunch of notes,
Mm-hmm.
writing notes down. I give them, right, a worksheet, right, to kind of work on just trying kind of transition, right? And again, different classes, different discussions. I have some 30-1s, right, grade 12s that are really curious and some that are more absorbing and not quite so
Mm-hmm.
open. So it
Mm-hmm.
becomes, it's sort of a dynamic. And again, 27 years teaching, you have to be aware that, yeah, some classes are going to be really, right, engaging and some classes are going to be more cerebral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of kids aren't really prepared for that style of like, because even I would say that I stand at the front, I teach, I
Mm-hmm.
talk, I ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they're more accustomed to something else, or they're like, oh, we're just, looking at the PowerPoint again today. It's like, yeah, if you listen, like I'm expanding on every single slide, right? And they're not accustomed to that, but
Yeah,
it's
I try to do as
it's
much formative assessment too
yeah.
with Blookets and Kahoots and Jeopardy games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of bring in that knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
some opening, right? Entrance slips, right? Where they kind of work on the information we learned from the day before, right? And then kind of discuss, right, those issues as well. So it's not just me
Mm-hmm.
straight lecturing, right, to them. But I certainly see because I might know the material, but when I mark diploma exams, I see some teachers that have really engaging, and they put that right, effort into
Mm-hmm.
making right, all kinds of tactile and again lessons. But I also look at them, I said, I bet you those aren't teaching a calm, a religion 15, right? And different, they probably have a social 20, a social 30, and they can make work
Yeah,
with it.
well, with my hopeful transition to Edmonton Public, like one of the things David, like Mr. Murphy and I discussed was, you know, one of my fears is definitely like, oh, I don't want to go there and just be the social 10 guy, right? And there's benefits to it because you can just really focus and narrow, and you can really create a powerful course, and find those spaces for more engagement that's not just like me teaching or the teacher teaching and maybe the student learning or student pursuing their learning. But oh man, my my first practicum, my IFX, the 25-day one,
Hmm.
my teacher, his schedule, Francis Goupy, he's been teaching for a while, probably retired now, but he had uh, 10-2, 10-1 in the morning.
Mm.
In the afternoon, he had a whopping 10-2, 10-1. And so and this, for the students who might not know this, it's effectively the same thing that you're
Yes, same
teaching. It's just
material.
just a matter of how much you're willing to explore it and how you'd assess it. And even then, it's like, well, you're writing about the same stuff. It's like, you should be able to get the same material. It's just how much you're willing to explore. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that just sounds so boring,
And
and
the social 10 is really sophisticated from the old social 10, right?
hmm
Focused on, again, things that I think really matter,
hmm
globalization, but it can become stale. So about eight
I
years ago,
I mean, from the teacher's point of view,
yeah,
just like talking about the
right.
same thing, like 4 classes a day throughout the
It can
semester,
be.
like that wouldn't be my
No.
enjoyment. But then you have the other extreme where you might see here where, like some teachers in the school as well, like let's say the phys ed ones who are like in the gym and then they're like Dan, Mr.
Yeah.
Potvin, like in the gym and then walking down there, like that's not fun
No.
either, right? Or going from comm to religion
I
to
know.
social to,
Yeah, from an
this and
academic
that. Yeah.
elective, right? From a phys ed to it's like
Right.
academic classes. That's not fun. But
Right.
yeah,
So for sure, right? It means that, you got to be more of a jack of all trades rather than very like incredibly proficient in one,
yeah.
right?
But
And
I mean, it depends on how you want to embrace it. Because
mhm,
as I was starting to say, about 8 years ago, I decided let's do some more engaging social 10. So we do tug of wars, right? Where I have some of the students, right? The larger students act
mhm,
as a supranational trade block, and they have to pick smaller students, right? Which I gave them
uh-huh,
placards to wear over.
yeah,
And it's a tug of war, right? So they get the smallest student and they have no
mhm,
chance with the bigger students. And then they get to have another country come join them. And
mhm,
so that it gets harder and
mhm,
harder. So we talk about how countries joining can compensate for that.
mhm,
And I have the kids dress up a chocolate chip cookie as a utopia, and then they have to extract the chocolate chips as resources. And some of them really destroy their cookie, and some actually, right, make that.
That's a
And yeah,
pretty
there's
good
things to
lesson. Yeah.
do,
Mhm,
right, that can get you out of the tedium from the both teacher's point of view and the student's point of view.
mhm,
I think part of that is why I'm in here at 5, sometimes 5:30 in the morning, right? What can I do,
mhm,
right? That being said, I am planning on retiring soon, and the idea is how much do I want to put in, right?
mhm,
And that might be, again, another reason why I probably should get out of the teaching profession, is because when you ever find yourself stopping, well, because I shouldn't do that because I don't want to put the effort. It's like, that's a ridiculous, right, way of thinking,
mhm.
right? Because it doesn't matter, first year, 28th year, right? A person should have that same
Well, and then
proficiency.
like, I mean, how long has this curriculum been out?
Since about 2007.
Okay, right, and you've been teaching since then.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
So
1998.
I guess at some point you might want to revamp and think like, okay, how do I teach this differently? Right? How do I freshen this up as well? But
Hmm.
I think, yeah, that's very important. If you find yourself saying like, I don't want to put the effort in, it's like, okay, well, maybe we should move on, right? Try
Yes.
something else,
Yeah.
right? Mm-hmm.
And what you're doing here with the podcast is exactly what I want to do. Me and my brother, right, put together a podcast, but just positivity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think we might call it like two peas in a podcast or something to that effect. And again, anybody with
Yeah,
negativity would sort of just edit out, right,
yeah,
with
yeah,
that,
yeah,
and just talk what good news of the day, right, that you have.
yeah, yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
What are your plans after retirement?
yeah, want to travel,
Mm-hmm.
right? My wife is still working for a few more years after that, so I'm right? Can't do much about that, but I want to use artificial intelligence more. I've got ideas for children's books, right? That um, this is patented now or patent pending, right? About a little boy named Edward, and
Yeah.
every book has a different challenge, right? So I call it special ed, right? And special ed might be a paraplegic, or special ed might be autistic, or special ed might have, right, going through a divorce, right, parent divorce and stuff, and have these kind of books out there
It's very
as
wholesome.
those.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I know that I'm right, not so proficient at the artwork, so hopefully AI can maybe make right kind of these and maybe again help me along with the storyline.
Or if there's a student out there that wants to help with the
Yeah,
project, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Right,
that'd be
and
cool.
yeah.
No, that'd be awesome.
So
Okay.
that's one thing. Again, maybe going on the teachers convention circuit, right? I know that myself and Mr. Suko were hinting at right, kind of doing a bit of that for teacher wellness.
What does that mean, this circuit, when you say that?
There are what 5 teachers conventions in Alberta, right?
Okay.
Starts with the North Central Teachers Convention, and you can kind of again go and sort of put presentation together. Then
Is North
there's
Central, is that us?
that's
Yeah,
us,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
then Calgary has theirs, and then Edmonton, Greater Edmonton has theirs, and Edmonton Public has theirs, or sorry, Edmonton has theirs as well. So that's just 5, but you could also kind of go around the country, and maybe if it's something that people might want to hear from.
And you two were discussing speaking at them,
Yeah,
or just
or
participating?
well, strategies and
Yeah.
teaching, and it doesn't have to be just right. We've got a kind of few other things, wellness, but of course he's a tech genius, right? But how do you implement that perhaps into core courses or other kind of courses? So, right, we might have a coffee this summer and look at that. We're talking about doing the Camino, which is a pilgrimage from the Santiago de Compostela in Spain,
Okay, yeah.
right? Which is about a 30-day walk from that. So we're looking at perhaps trying to do that
Yeah, yeah.
as well. We've been talking about that for about 9 years since we sort of were on our rec or religious committee, right? Talking about
You
doing
and
that.
Mr. Suko.
Yeah,
Okay. I didn't know you knew Ray that long.
yeah,
Okay, okay,
yeah, quite a
okay.
while.
I guess that makes sense. You've been working with Star
Yeah,
like
yeah, since
almost your whole
2000.
career.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why coming in here, I didn't know teachers, but I knew teachers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mr. Potvin, Mr. Suko,
Hmm.
right? Yeah,
Hmm.
Mr. Heck.
Okay.
Mhm.
You went to teach up north.
Yes, that was my
W-
first teaching assignment. I didn't want to be a sub and go on the sub list. I
Yeah.
wanted to get right in there, and they were hiring up in Fort Resolution in Northwest Territories. So I had a phone interview, right, with a person and went up there. It was a very interesting experience because the principal and vice principal were a divorced couple from Antigua, from the Caribbean, and they're up in their territories. I found that very strange. He was a less than competent principal, right,
Yeah.
and he had a breakdown and issues. And then halfway through the school year, he also had another issue where they removed him and his wife took over, and she was a marvel, right, at so it's just a 180-degree change,
Okay.
right,
Okay.
from that. So it was a bad start, but a great end of the
Okay.
right year.
You worked up at this fort, what?
Fort Resolution,
Fort Resolution for 2 years.
1 year.
1 year.
And then the second year is at the O'Cheese Reserve by Rocky Mountain House, teaching grade 7,
Oh, okay.
right, as a
How was that?
generalist. Again, interesting because I did have one of my students twice taken out in handcuffs, right, in grade
The same
7.
student?
Same student,
Okay.
right? So troubled. Another student that had, again, you could tell he was huffing gas, right, because he had the lips, right, discolored. But on the same method, myself, the grade 9 teacher, and the computer teacher decided we want to take some students to Europe on a school trip. So we dedicated all our efforts into raising money for that. Couldn't quite make it, right? We had about 16,000 raised. We needed 44,000, but it just so happens that the band received royalties from the oil and gas that year. So we went to the band. We said, "We're shy. Can you perhaps help us with this?" And they
Because it
said,
was all Indigenous students,
all
eh? Yeah.
Indigenous students, and they
From
said,
the same band, I'm
Yep,
assuming.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely, grade 7 to 9, right? Not high school, grade 7 to 9." And they said, "Guys, you give us that 16,000, we'll underwrite the whole 44,000, right, for the whole trip with that." Uh,
That's why the trade. What?
well, 16,000 certainly, right? You know, we they again it showed what we were willing to commit. but with the oil and gas revenue, right? They now had the money to
Oh, this
put.
is before you started raising the
Yeah.
money. Okay, so they gave you a goal. So if you get to 16,000,
No,
okay.
this is actually right, through, we went to them hat in hand saying we did not
Mm-hmm.
have enough money
Mm-hmm.
and we're 3 months
Yeah.
away from
Hey,
that.
give me a second. Okay, we're good.
And so we didn't have enough money to go, but they understood our efforts because we had movie nights where we sold, right, kind of concession foods. We had bingo nights, all these in place. They saw the effort.
This was just run by the three of you.
Yeah,
Like there's three teachers.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the students, of course, right? They
Mm-hmm.
were going. We're into.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they got involved and
Yeah,
said,
they
okay,
got
well, yeah,
involved.
okay, okay.
So I think the band just appreciated that, and they realized they had extra money, and so
Mm-hmm.
why not send students to Europe? We had one student in grade 7, one of my students, and she was a ward of the province. She had no parents, right? So she was put up as a ward. It took a while to get the hoops,
As
go through the hoops.
a
The government was in charge
ward,
of her.
WARD.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So actually, I had to go to Drayton Valley a few times just to go to the government building to get
Mm-hmm.
kind of go through those hoops. And I remember clearly because we were in Innsbruck, Austria, and she turned to me and she goes, "Mr. Olson, I don't ever want to go home." She was just having that kind of right, sort of surreal moment, right? Where she just kind of, right, that
Wow.
this is,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a
Like a
wonderful
magical
experience.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that was a good experience.
How many kids did you take?
We took a total of 13 people. We took a couple of parents, but again, three of us, and then about 10 or 11 students,
Okay.
right, that came.
Okay. And then what countries did you go to?
Switzerland, Austria, England, France, Germany.
Wow.
It was
How
a
long were you
whirlwind
guys
trip.
gone?
About 9 days, right? These are EF tours, and they're not that long because they're over
Yeah.
spring break, right? So we were going, but we had a wonderful tour director who treated the students really good. They had a lot of issues, but a lot of the students gravitated towards him. He was a wonderful, right, kind of a people person as well. Yeah, so it's one of those catalyst moments.
That would have been like a
Hmm.
life-changing trip for some of those kids, I
Yes.
assume. Did you stay in contact with any of these people?
No. No.
Okay.
I
So
wanted to
once
stay there
one
another year, but they were looking at replacing me with Indigenous teachers, and at that time I didn't associate myself as a Métis. Right, it was only later, right, when we found out our DNA and we knew that we had right Indigenous blood, but I didn't. So I said, yeah, okay, I could see where you might want to bring Indigenous teachers, right?
That's interesting. So after, like, did the other two people who helped
They
organize that trip, did they also get replaced?
they got replaced. Well, they left on their own accord because they had different positions, right?
Okay.
They were
Okay.
going towards, yeah,
That's so interesting that they wouldn't want you to stay.
yeah. Well, it's what it
How
is. It happened to me up in the territories as well, right?
oh, you
But
got replaced by
yeah,
like an okay.
in the end, those two teachers did not stay up there, so they asked me back, and I said, no, right, I'm not coming back.
No, not after you,
Yeah,
close the door behind you
that's
like
right.
that, right?
Yeah, so
Okay. I'm assuming then by Rocky Mountain House, those teachers perhaps stayed. Right.
one of the teachers that I taught with is now down teaching south in Crow's Nest Pass kind of area,
Okay,
that
okay.
deep, far south Alberta. I'm not sure where the computer teacher
Okay.
instructor is. He might have gone into private
Yeah.
business, right? I just
Okay.
don't know because I lost contact with the Ochis
Yeah. Okay.
community.
What was it like living in Rocky Mountain House area?
We were actually living on the reserve. They had
Yeah.
teacherages, so we were across the street from the school. So it was a very interesting experience. I was roommates with the high school teacher, and we got along fine at the beginning. But then something happened where he just did not care for me anymore. Right, and I have no idea why. I can't explain it, but it was just a personality thing, and he kind of kept to himself as well. But he had a tough string as well because he had 40 students to start, and by the end of the first month, he only had 4 students left. And the story goes that every girl was pregnant at that time as well. So that was kind of life on the reserve back then, sort of not really expecting much right from post-secondary, right, world as well. So I can only imagine, right, maybe frustration on his part.
What were the ages of the students then?
They would be from 10 to 8 grade, 10 to 12. He had all the high school.
Oh,
So,
okay. So,
yeah,
okay. So the high school girls were
yeah,
getting because you were teaching the junior high.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was grade
Yeah.
7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Wow. That's.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some friends who teach in Wetaskiwin, and they taught on a reserve as well, and eventually they became principals of the reserve school there as well. And
Yeah, it takes a calling. It's a
yeah.
calling
Yeah.
to stay on one of those communities as well because it's more relationship than
Yeah.
it is academic, and you have to go in with that mindset. Right? Just have a great relationship. What does it matter if a student doesn't achieve 90% or mastery if they had a good experience? because they got a lot of strikes against them already, and they don't need
Hmm.
right education that drops the ball.
How do you find that philosophy compares, like, let's say in a public school, let's say, or like where we're at?
Well, there's certainly expectations from the parents and the students themselves that they're looking at a post-secondary world. Probably, I would say, what, 65, 70% of the kids are really sure they're going to go on to some type of post-secondary schooling,
Hmm.
whether that's in the trades
Okay.
or academics. So
Hmm.
they've really got this idea of right, pushing themselves towards that, and the parents really want them probably something more than just being right, in the work, um, day to
Hmm.
day, 9 to 5
Okay.
grind.
So you're
Yeah,
kind of balancing that desire, both intrinsic from the students and parents,
yeah,
and then looking at that and going like, okay, like, hey, you need to perform well as well because you want to go here and to go
yes.
there and succeed, you need to be able to do it. Okay.
And I was counselor for 6, 7 years out in Drayton Valley, so right, I knew what to tell the students, even now.
What do you mean by that?
Career counselor,
Okay.
professional counselor, personal counseling, right? They kind of gave that to me as well.
Do you have a like a
Nope, no,
training in that?
no
Okay.
speciality in
Okay.
that. Just obviously, when I took that, we did certainly training towards that. But
Hmm.
small school, we didn't have near enough time. I was only given one prep every other day, and you're trying to kind of reach 40 or 50 students for post secondary. What's your role? And try. It was very, very challenging.
Hmm.
And then when administration changed, and we now had two admins, a principal and a vice principal, they gave the counseling to the vice principal because they had a bit more time, right, to do that. But I certainly had some insight into what was expected, right, from that. Because so I tell my students in grade 12, I said, you understand you're competitive. Yes, you might have an 80%, and yes, you might have that early admissions into university, but guess what? Somebody could bump you out, right? If they have an 85% average, right? You're not guaranteed just because, right, you have
Hmm.
that because it is competitive and you have to know that.
Well, one of the things, like, there's a couple of alumni I still chat with and stay connected with, and like, yeah, like one of them was, valedictorian here, and it's like, hey man, there's probably a couple valedictorians in your courses, right? Like
Yep,
you're competing against, right?
absolutely.
And then then you'll have we kind of joke about it. It's like you have like an international student whose family's honor depends upon their performance, right? And they're both coming in with this pressure, right, to do well, a culture of like, what do you do other than perform well at school and whatever, and the potentially that intrinsic desire, or just intrinsically very intelligent, right, very capable students. It's like, hey, you might be a big fish here, but this is a small pond, right? There's only, I mean, how many high school students do we have here? Like 200,
Yep.
right? So recognizing that, like, this is the, like, you kind of understand video games. This is like the pre-game loading screen, the lobby, right? It's like
Absolutely.
everyone's welcome to be in the lobby, but when the game starts, you might not get on a team, right? And
Yep.
and then all of a sudden you're against other people and they're going to do very well, right? They have no desire to lose.
You could
Yeah.
technically have as many honor students in your larger city schools as we have grade 12 students, right?
I would
Honors.
assume that's the
Yep.
case, right?
And
Like if
and
you're in a 100 level science lecture,
yep.
500 kids, 300 of those people could easily have been above 80% average,
Yep.
right? And if they're in an engineering program, they must have been above,
They had
right?
to. And again, right, they had
I've
to
never
have
even thought about it that way. That's
it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, wow.
And for our students to make it, right, it's actually really impressive when you're
Hmm.
talking about, right, the where they could draw from,
Hmm.
right, that amount of kind of knowledge.
Hmm. Were you involved in any sports at all, kind of growing
Oh
up?
yeah,
And
yeah. Come from a very economically depressed family, and when
hmm.
parents got divorced, it was a little bit, which is why I wasn't working. But so I wasn't able to do the real expensive ones after that. Hockey, I always had used hockey equipment, but then after a while, it became pretty expensive,
Hmm.
right, to be in. So I had to kind of drop that. But I stayed in baseball, basketball, right. Those things are pretty relatively,
Hmm.
right, kind of cost effective, right, for me. I could pay for my own, right,
Hmm.
sort of. Registration and equipment. Yeah, I have volleyball, right? I played that when I went to Nathan University, just rec teams, but still kind of
Okay,
kept me
okay. I
kept me
thought
kind
maybe
of
you were on the
active.
ooks.
No, no. When
Yeah.
you're my girth and you can barely get up and spike anymore, I was
Fair,
telling Mr.
fair.
Potvin that I missed the days where you could actually stuff the serve because that was my specialty, right, in volleyball, right? You
Hmm.
know, I had no problem when somebody was power spiking, right, to get up there, but you can't do that, of course, anymore.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
not fair.
Okay. Yeah. How do you find that balance of, athletics and academics? Like, what are your thoughts
Yeah,
on
I would
that?
say, I would say volunteering has to play a part. I
Hmm.
would say volunteering, right? You know, athletics, right? You can even volunteer in athletics if you don't feel comfortable volunteering, say at a senior center where you take some of your students,
Hmm.
right? Or other areas, food, right? Food banks or, right? You know, kind of drop-in centers. But yeah, I'd say a well-balanced life is academics, athletics, volunteer, right? Family life
Hmm.
comes into play, right? You should have those kind of priorities down as well. Work might be important to you, but you have to ask yourself, why is work important to you in
Hmm.
high school?
Hmm.
Is it because you need something or you want something?
Hmm.
Okay, and again, try to take a look at the big picture. I certainly saw the struggles because I'm the only one that graduated high school, let alone university, from my family. So it was
Oh wow.
always,
Okay.
yeah, they were always kind of, again, struggling to
Hmm.
try to find, right, you
Hmm.
know, kind of their place. And unfortunately, my one brother killed drinking and driving, made bad choice, made bad decision. I tell that to my students as well. I said, yeah, I'm a hypersensitive to people at that age, right, you
Hmm.
know, because I'm not sure you have the maturity to kind of, right, you know, sort of handle alcohol, right,
Hmm.
you know, and what it can entail. And again, he dropped out in grade 9, right? And he was an excellent artist, but he didn't follow that path, right? And he was a hard worker, right? His character was excellent,
Hmm.
but right, the fates were against him,
Hmm.
right? Drinking and driving, making a bad choice, right? Kind of goes back to, again, those choices you make in junior high. It's like you might not think it's important, but it's like, yeah, you understand what maturity and thinking is because
Hmm.
he was 20 to grade 9, that might be old, right? But somebody like me who's 60, 20 is not old. And he made a
Oh,
choice.
20 is so young.
Yeah.
So young. Yeah.
But
Hmm.
again, no time like the present to start thinking mature and start thinking deep. And that can be
Hmm.
in grade 9, 10, 11, or 12.
I have an assignment that I do with my students kind of at the start of the year, and maybe I'll revamp it, but it is along that lines of asking the students, what are some of the goals you have? What are some of the things you'd want? And starting the process of encouraging them to think a little bit more long term, right? And yeah, when you're like 16, 5 years is like a lifetime, right? 16 to 21, you'll be like multiple different people, right? But when you just look at the curriculum, it's like there often isn't a practical outlet for them to think long term, right? It's like, so they might think long term historically. Hey, let's go back 600 years. What happened?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know how well they grasp that, right? And what that really means to them. But it's like, okay, let's talk about your life. Like, where do you want to be 5 years from now? And I was just listening to a video of one of my mentors, Jocko Willink, who has a very uh, kind of wide reach online and was a former Navy SEAL and
Oh,
kind of moved through those ranks. But
yeah.
he was explaining that he did kind of a little circuit around some schools and went to like elementary and junior high schools and maybe some high schools in there as well. And he would discuss with them and he talked to them and say, hey, listen, like some of you here, you're going to end up living in your car, right? Some of you here, you're going to, get addicted to substances. Some of you are going to own a house and some of you are never going to own a house. Some of you are always going to be renting, right? And breaking that down. And then he'd lead that into a conversation of like, the choices you make do matter, right? Because I see this funny meme all the time. It's like somebody saying like, getting ready to drive to work at 4 a.m. because I wanted to be funny in class instead of work hard, right? Instead of get better grades. And um, yeah, I think that there's more space for that conversation of like, what decisions, what choices are you making today, and how are they going to impact you later on, right? I was just watching a video last night about like the effects of lying, right? And continuing to lie. And it's like, hey, if you live in a lie, you won't be able to tell the truth when you need to, right? When you depend on it. And
Mm-hmm.
the compounding effect of telling the truth is that eventually you get to where you need to be, right? And sometimes that's in the gutter,
Yep.
right? Like it might still work out poorly, but you know?
I have a morning prayer that I do on deception.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about lies, when you lie, right, there's a lot, it's a lot deeper than just betraying somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And when you tell the truth, you don't ever have to worry about being caught in a lie because you're always telling the truth. And it's always
Mm-hmm.
the person that keeps kind of building onto that. And I said, yeah, I said, nobody wants to hang around with somebody who's deceitful.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to be that person?
Yeah, I've been around people like that, and it's just like, okay, the second they start talking, it's like, well, my ears are gonna shut down because I have no idea if what you're saying is true, false, if it's like realistic. Like you might be telling me about an emergency. It's like, well, like last week there was someone else with this emergency, and a month before that there was someone else. So like, I don't know, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, right? But you know what? You know what's always around 911. So if there's an emergency, you can call, right? But
Yes.
so
When they sow
right.
those seeds of doubt, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
right. And the
oh,
the, the
yeah,
infamous story, the boy who cried wolf, right?
yeah.
So,
And I tell the students, I say to them, I said, really, if you really want to kind of look down deep, right, you guys in grade 10 and 11 and 12 that are looking for jobs, you really don't have a few people that you can put as reference, and a teacher would be one of those.
hmm
You tell, right, me, are you the kind of person that I can actually feel proud giving you a reference? Or are you
hmm
going to be one of the people that I'm going to say I can't, right, and I'll
hmm
right, give you any reference,
yeah,
right? And that's what those issues, pardon me, that's what those that thought process has to come in.
hmm yeah. Talk to me about your faith. I'm curious. So you've been
Yeah,
working at a Catholic school district for about 25 years then.
I was baptized Lutheran as a
Okay.
kid, um, and my family goes back right centuries as Lutheran. And but then at the age of 9 or 10, Mom kind of gave us a choice, right? Not really sit us down and say we want to, but she pretty much says, right, do you want to go to church or not? Well, what 9 or 10 year old kid really wants to kind of go to church, right? Especially when your friends aren't, right?
Yeah.
They'd rather play with them. So I sort of lost, right, any kind of link to that. I was always spiritual, and my mom, right, was heavily into Christianity and spirituality. I think it's the spirituality part that I sort of drained right from her as
hmm
well. But organized religion, I had an issue with, right, and that's my fault, not the
hmm
religion's fault, right? I was losing, right,
Do you want to kind of discuss that? Because
well,
that is
it's just
like,
people look at religion and they blame, right? If there's a war started because of this, but that's a human base. That's not what, right? God had intended, right,
hmm
for us to be. He put us on here, right, to kind of again, right, kind of be a good person here, acknowledge um, what we have, and again, pass it, pay it forward. And really, in the end, that's talking about being a good person, whether you're an atheist or a person of faith, right? You can be
hmm
a good person. But I think I use that as a crutch. Oh, I don't want to be this because this religious person, right, kind of stole from that, or this religious person is a hypocrite, right, and
hmm
focused on that. And when my brother was killed, certainly questioned, right, those kind of things, what kind of God would take, right, a person so wonderful, right, to him, and realizing not till I was about 40, right, that was not God's intent. He didn't
hmm
wake up one morning and say, I'm going to take Randy Olson's brother away from
hmm
him.
Yeah,
And
I'm gonna make Randy suffer a
yeah,
little bit. Let's.
and so it was actually my coming into Star Catholic that sort of reignited that because my very first year, I was uh, renting out a basement of a senior teacher, and she's been teaching for 30 years. And she said, yeah, I'll be your sponsor, right? If you want to go to RCIA and find out more about, and that's the adult version of getting into the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be you don't have to be converted into a Catholic. Right? You can just go there and find out. But it got me deeper thinking about it. Right? It was a wonderful experience just talking, right, to people about faith as well. And then, of course, next year I did, right, convert to Catholicism as well. And again, when
How old were you then?
um, 27 years, 2000 anyway. So what is that? 24 years ago,
hmm
I would have been 36,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And then my journey has certainly kind of had deepened and deepened, right?
Yeah.
For that. The very last thing I said to my mom before she passed away was the Hail Mary, right?
hmm
I would never have done that. I never did that for my brother, right? When that happened. Um,
How old were you when your brother
I was
passed?
18,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
not a lot of 18-year-olds that are very religious.
No,
Like,
no. And as I said, I
hmm
was until it was only till I was about 34 that I decided to kind of there's something right out there, right?
hmm
Doing a little bit more reading Buddhism, right? Hinduism, reading the Gita, right? Reading Lord Buddha's kind of writings, Tibetan Buddhism,
hmm
getting into that. Then when I was lucky enough to get into the Star Catholic and they gave me religion to teach, and I would kind of get deeper because
hmm
they would have Buddhism and Hinduism in some of the courses,
hmm
and I taught a comparative religion, right? I said, yeah. It actually made me think more because we were at this adult um, roundtable discussion at St. Joseph College at University of Alberta, and there must have been about 20, 25 strong Catholic people, and they asked us to come into one with a controversial question or an issue, right, for
hmm
one of that. And I came in there,
Do you
and
remember the question?
uh, it
Or the issue?
was I do. They just wanted you to kind of stir this discussion about God, right?
Okay.
And um, I said, yeah, okay. And it took me only about a couple of days to think about something. I went in the next day and they kind of came to me and I said, you realize that God isn't Christian, right? And kind of eyes kind of perked up. And I think some people get into that sort of mindset that God's a Christian God. And I said, no, no, God transcends all religions, right? And God's even with the atheists, even though they don't
hmm
want to acknowledge that as well.
Uh-huh.
Because he was here and you can't call him Christian when his son, right, what the Christians believe, right,
hmm
was after him. God was here beforehand, right? Um, and again, when you think of Islam and you think about the 99 names of Allah in there and you
hmm
look at them and you go, that makes perfect sense. And
hmm
why, far be it from me as a Christian to think that I have carte blanche on religion. When I say, well, of course, right, in Islamic faith, it makes sense that you would pronounce Allah in this way if
hmm
you're right, if he's merciful, and you'd pronounce it this way,
hmm
compassion. And so, yeah, right. But I think some people have this mindset that God is of their faith and their
hmm
faith only.
That's
So,
interesting. I've never thought about it that way.
yeah,
I don't know if I've ever been like, oh yeah, God's Muslim. It's like I think at least with my upbringing, it was always like, well, God's God,
yeah.
right? And we're kind of taught, and this is in the Quran as well, that Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, is told that like Muhammad, your job is not to convert people. Like, your job is to give a message. Right? We'll take care of the conversion. God is saying, and I guess growing up, the mindset was always like, well, God is like its own entity. And what I've learned recently, as you said, it God is something outside of the realm of reality and understanding, right? And you can, and through the Islamic tradition, we comprehend God through his 99, we would call them attributes,
Hmm.
right? Just how God is. And we also kind of connect that with when when we're taught in various religions that, you're made in the image of God. Like, what does that mean, right?
Hmm.
Because in Islam, God doesn't have a body, right? God doesn't need a body, right? He's, I don't really know what God is other than God, but um, how do you understand being made in God's image? Well, like he has these attributes, so he's merciful. He's generous. He's forgiving, right? And there's all these other ones that I don't know about, right? And God is the supreme of all of these, but humans have that within them, right? And so, yeah, like I like what you said there that yeah, God transcends
Yes.
whatever faith you're in. God transcends your disbelief as well if you don't
Yeah,
believe in God, and is with you kind of regardless
sure.
of what. So,
And again, this roundtable discussion, they
mhm,
couldn't really deny that logic,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Some, I think, tried to, right? But I said, you can't, right?
hmm
You can't because, right, in Buddhism, there's an energy, right? They believe, right? In Aboriginal, right, the creator,
hmm
right? In Hinduism, right? Yes, you have the three gods, Shiva, Vishnu, and
hmm
Brahman, but you have, right, the main. Yeah, it's something that you can't compartmentalize into
hmm
one
hmm
faith only. And I mean, God put us here because I think God loves variety and
hmm
diversity.
hmm What then was there anything kind of that significantly contributed to your like, let's call it a conversion? Could we call it a conversion?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right,
I'd
and
like to
because
think,
especially like you're pretty close to 40, right? So no doubt, like, hey, this person's an adult, right? They have fully formed thinking, they've been on their own, roughly speaking, for some time, right? um where many people maybe grow up religious and they just stay. And, like myself, might find in many moments in their life where it's kind of like a malaise of religion of like, yeah, I'm just this thing and I've just always been this thing, right? But um, for someone to come into it in adulthood is, at least in my perspective, very different. So was there anything that was like a big push to get you converted?
I think probably if I look back on it, probably what I saw when I was traveling, right?
Hmm.
And the inhumanity, but also the humanity that kind of
Hmm.
goes with that, and saying there's something divine, right? That helps people out. And when I do help, right, people that need help, there's something that kind of flares up. But I'm
Hmm.
also well aware of when I don't help a person out, that something was missing, right? That I didn't kind of grasp that spark, right? That divinity that's out there as well. But there's nothing, unfortunately. There was this like lightning bolt
Hmm.
moment, right, that kind
Hmm.
of caused me to kind of go into this one. And I know I'm still a sinner, right? Of one of the highest orders, right? And that's going to
Hmm.
be an ongoing struggle because I can be slothful and I can be, right, kind of
Hmm.
gluttonous at times or what I think. But I, of course, pray to God, right? I said, hopefully, God, you see how I'm changed from 10 years ago to now,
Hmm.
right? But I'm still on that path,
Hmm.
right? And I probably will never attain where I want to attain.
Hmm.
But no, I don't think I can nail it down to any one specific
Okay.
time.
I think that last bit's like an important thing to understand about, the human journey on this earth, that you'll never necessarily get to the highest pinnacle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps, for many of us, myself included, we'll never really get to our full potential, right? There's just, I don't know, I get distracted by too much, and
Of
maybe
course.
maybe that's a maybe I hope that's something of my youth, but I have my skepticism, right?
Yes, the
Hmm.
21st century trappings, right, are certainly
Hmm.
there as well, but
Hmm.
don't kid yourself, right? Within 15, 20 minutes of a bike ride or a car ride, you're out in the country and you can reflect, right? And
Hmm.
hopefully kind of
Hey,
focus on,
discussing.
yeah, just
Yeah.
faith,
Faith.
right?
Faith. Okay.
And yeah, just
Hmm.
it is a journey. And again, I can see why Hinduism has reincarnation because you're
Hmm.
probably not going to get right to right. So whatever you finish
Hmm.
at, you'll come back and maybe start it again in a different right form.
Hmm. Is there a particular prayer you find yourself going to regularly in your own life?
Every morning I pray the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be.
And
Right,
is that like with the class, or do you do that on
on
your own?
my own.
Okay.
Yeah, the prayers I have in the morning are usually pinpointed for what may be talking about in class. So if we're talking about immigration in social nine, we might have refugee prayers for the refugees,
Hmm.
prayer for the people that are dispossessed.
Hmm.
For those, I usually try to kind of factor that in, and it has been fairly successful in focusing the students, right? Because it's not just a small prayer. I'll have images on my screen, and sometimes I'll have videos after that I kind of go towards, right, and kind of really kind of bring it right kind of alive for the students. So I've got right, about 140 prayers on my PowerPoint,
Okay.
and then some for Christmas and some for Lent as
Okay.
well. So,
Okay.
and
What was your what was your university experience like? You went
um,
there when you were about 30.
yeah, I absolutely loved it.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if at 18 if I would have been, but it was very much I found myself right, at university, very much kind of doing the university thing, going out to the quad and sitting in the and just kind of watching life go by and just sort of right taking
Hmm.
advantage of that. Um, I was older than a lot of other students. I did have a student come to me when I was at Red Deer because I did 2 years at Red Deer and transferred to the U of A, and she was just right out of high school and she was part of the drama club
Hmm.
and she took a part where she was this depressed, right, angst-ridden, right, kind of person. And she come up to me and goes, "Randy, I have no idea how to play this. I've never even had a pet pass away, let alone, right, anybody else, right? And I don't know how to play this person." I said, "Well, you have to put yourself in a dark hole that you can't get out of, right? It's like a big, big
Hmm.
hole that's so slick you can't climb out. There's no ladder with you, and it's just all black. And people are looking down, but you're not really paying attention because you just
Hmm.
want to get out." Right, for that as well.
Hmm.
So it put me into a mindset of, yeah, not everybody has the same life experience, right? Some
Hmm.
people have a pretty good life.
Well, and then yeah, like if she's about 18, 19, and you're about 30, like it's like, hey, you haven't even lived yet, right? Like you just got out of the
Yeah,
confines of a public classroom, right? And
yes.
now you're in university, which is, a baby step up, right? Perhaps maybe it was a little bit more intense back then, but Yeah,
But I
like if
also know
you're
at
there.
18, my brother was killed. So
Mm-hmm.
eight different perspectives. I also know, right? You know, my
Mm-hmm.
parents were
Yeah,
divorced
yeah,
at
yeah.
13,
Yeah.
right? There are those things that kind of,
And yeah,
and there's
those
old
individual.
tolls,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't wish tragedy on anybody, but
Yeah.
they are learning experiences.
Yeah. They'll age you, that's for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Right. They'll probably wear you down. Yeah.
You
Okay.
can if you let it, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Yeah,
Okay.
my older brother, left us for about 14 years and had no contact with us at all. Was in a toxic marriage, right? Had three kids, right? But the wife has now kind of poisoned them, so he doesn't see them anymore. They'd be in their 20s now. They're all adults. But he
Mm-hmm.
came back just before my mom passed away, right? You know, a few years before that, and kind of got contact, which is probably a great experience, right? For that too. And now, of course, right back into the
Mm-hmm.
to the family. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there is that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're in university and you're really enjoying it and you're
Hmm.
kind of soaking it in, I guess, and probably have the kind of mental maturity and a bit of life experience to enjoy like, hey, this is, a unique time in life when you're at university. It
Yep.
really is. I think that that's something like 18 to 22 you don't really appreciate because you're just so bombarded by assignments and whatnot, and you're kind of really stressed and like myself and many others perhaps wondering like, okay, am I doing the right thing? Like, should I be here? That even when I look back, it's like it's either neutral or negative. It's like, oh, I didn't enjoy that, or just like, it happened, right? And then with gratitude, obviously, because it affords me this job and whatnot, right? So there's definitely that. But the university itself is kind of like, oh, I wouldn't do that again. Like I'd probably wait, right? So you spend 4 years, 2 years at Red Deer, 2 years at the U of A, I'm
Yep.
assuming. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, some of
What else? Yeah.
there's part of me that says should I stay for an after degree, right, and go any further, but I think I just wanted to get out there and teach, right, and once I realized that was kind of a vocation for me, right, so kind of focused on that. And some people said, oh, I should go into coming being a principal and admin, but that's the same thing that killed me in the food industry, going into management,
Mm-hmm.
right? That would have probably killed me in the teaching as well, becoming a principal. I think being a principal in administration is a calling as well, because you have to, you're sort of out of the classroom and now you have to worry about budgets. Now you have to worry about hiring and firing, right? Kind of,
Mm-hmm.
well, not so much firing, but letting go of some people that if there's issues and you can't
Mm-hmm.
keep them. But I said, yeah, that's not for me. So I didn't want to go into a principalship, right? I just wanted to kind of
Mm-hmm.
stay in the classroom as well. But again, some people just right into that. And that's what they see with being an administrator. But university, yeah, it was great, right? I wish I could be a professional student, right? Because I would have probably stayed. I almost came to be supposed to be an anthropologist because I had such a wonderful anthropology professor, and he invited me down to Mexico for a Day of the Dead sort of ceremony because that was his thing for
That's
6 weeks.
cool.
I
Yeah.
didn't get to go because that was money, cost money out of my pocket that
Yeah.
I didn't have, and it was what, a 9 week or something, right? I would have got 9 credits
Yeah.
from that or something, but
Whoa. Okay.
he was very very good.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a market research and realized, oh, only 1 out of 100 actually get anthropology, right? And sure enough, when I was in construction, right, there was a person who had an anthropology, a PhD in anthropology, but he was a laborer because he couldn't get a job, right? As
Oh,
an anthropologist.
that's got to be rough.
Yeah, and you got all the way writing for funding, right? Funding. But
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, eh.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I guess because I've heard Mr. Hack talk about it as well, going back to university, kind of when you're older,
Mm-hmm.
like past 28, let's say. And I guess definitely once you're past 30, it's very different because you're a lot closer to your professors' age, right? So like an
There was a
invitation from a
professor,
professor
yeah,
to
there's a
like,
few professors that said, hey, Randy, let's go out for a coffee,
hmm
right? Some of us in our small little lecture groups in our ed sec, right?
hmm
When we only had, say, 20 students, we'd go to
hmm
just a pub.
we had another interruption and neither of us remember what we were discussing, so that'll just be a little
Yeah,
blurb.
a
Yeah.
little blurb. But again, that's my retirement plan. It's just to get a little apartment, right? Overlooking the river valley.
Yeah, we were just
Down there.
discussing, but yeah, I guess if you're willing to share. So yeah, you're thinking move to Edmonton.
Yes, my wife is still working and she
Yeah.
works downtown at a pharmacy. She makes
Oh,
compounds, right, for the pharmacy
your wife's a
as well.
drug dealer.
Yeah, I
Or
call it
no,
a
no, no.
sorceress.
Yeah,
She's a sorceress.
she's the one
Yeah,
who makes the drugs and
yeah.
someone
She's
else
got
sells it.
the
Okay.
bat wings and eye of newt and the
Yeah,
lizard
yeah.
gizzard and stuff that she puts together. So
Okay.
She's still working for a few more years, so I'll go downtown. Like I might get into subbing. Right? There's other avenues I think I told before about maybe writing books or AI or podcast, right? But I want to keep busy.
Would you consider like professorship?
No, that's going to take a lot more post-secondary, and I don't have the wherewithal to do thesis, right? And dissertations on
Hmm.
that. That's not my cup of tea anymore. Um, I do see myself more going down the river valley and maybe writing poetry,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Some
yeah,
bad poetry, but
yeah.
poetry nonetheless.
Couple
Right.
crappy haikus and then there I was in downtown maybe like a month or two ago and kind of I usually don't go east of 100th Street, but if you stay on Jasper
We're,
towards like
yeah,
100
we're
to
staying
80th
west.
Street,
We're
it's
staying. We figure
you
115th, 116th.
there was some spots that were not too bad,
Hmm.
like the buildings. It was like, whoa, there's some nice. I mean, they're really gentrifying the place. Let's put it.
Yes.
Let's say call for what it is, right? They're building new apartments or some of the pre-existing ones, and I
Hmm.
was like, if you're right along the river, it's actually quite
It
nice.
is.
But man, you go 2 blocks north, and
Yeah.
you're in a different type
I'm
of
very familiar with downtown Edmonton,
yeah.
having kind of lived there for a few years as I went to
Hmm.
Nate back in the 80s. And then, of course, later on, right, kind of moved back there as well. So I've never been really afraid of downtown. Of course, I'm a
Hmm.
big guy, anyways.
Hmm.
My wife, but a little bit more, right, kind of unfamiliar with the LRT, right, the LRT and that.
Yeah.
But again, right.
Who wants to take the LRT? It's like the last time I took it was teachers convention, and yeah, I mean the substance abuse that was happening in some of the
Yeah.
the stations and just
Yeah, some of the
just
attacks going on.
attacks and then
Mm,
just the mischievous characters as well. You
yeah.
just see people. It's like okay, like I'm
And I've never had that,
yeah.
right,
Hmm.
uh, experience,
Yeah.
but I know people, right? One of the teachers in Drayton Valley was his aunt who was actually pushed on the tracks at the McLennan raid
Oh
station
geez.
just by U of A. She was actually
Hmm.
pushed onto that, right? It's like, I don't understand, right? But
No, it's crazy.
yes, I'm hoping, right, over 28 years, my students going out there are combating, right, some of that.
Hopefully, right.
Because if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Hmm.
Apathy and lethargy, right? That's not an excuse, right? You have to
Hmm.
get involved.
Hmm. Okay. I don't have much more to ask
Me
other
neither.
than just thank you,
Thank you very much,
thank you.
Mr. Kawacha. It's been a pleasure teaching with you the last couple of years.
It has been great to teach with you.
Yeah.
I will say, um, when I got to the school March 2020, or sorry, March 2021, obviously that was after a tragic incident that occurred, and there was a lot of chaos and a lot of things went, you know, amiss. And I was hired in, and kind of the messaging was like, hey, like you're going to be with a group of kids. They've had a rough go right now recently. We just need someone to be nice and chill with them. It's like, cool, I can do that, right? And I still remember, so that was a grade 11 class, and I still remember they were on the portion of their course that was genocides.
Mm,
And I kind of started teaching a slide or two, and we're talking about Rwanda, and before we really get into it, I kind of look at the class, I'm like, hey kids, like, help me read the room here. Like, is this something we even want to discuss? Like, just given what's happened, like, because obviously that history is very difficult. And then a number of them were like, no, we're not feeling this. Like,
yeah.
this isn't what we want to discuss. Like, hey, all good. Okay, probably ended up putting a movie on and started building like a review package and built some bit of material that I still have to like, okay, let's just reiterate what you've learned this course so you have some sort of thing you can take with you. Fast forward then the next year, I get hired on towards the end of September. And I think that's when Fernando, Mr. Guzzo, retired as well. And so all of a sudden, it's like, okay, there's like nobody else here for the social studies department. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, I didn't get the Dash 1 courses, right? I still had some of the Dash 2 courses, which produced interesting mixture of characters. But when I heard that you were coming in, I was like, okay, this is great. Like, there'll be someone here. He's got a lot of experience. I can ask him questions, see what material he has, and just like maybe get some direction. Like, hey, like I'm trying this thing out with whatever. And you came in here 2022
Hmm.
September. Okay, okay. So I had that 1 year by myself, and that was a weird year as well. That was a COVID year. So we
Yeah.
went through. There was Fernando. He taught social. A friend of mine, Levy, he taught social, and then Lauren came in and he taught social. And so it was like, it's like I don't know. I guess being in the trenches, you're like
Yep.
reaching over, like, "Hey man, get me the radio." You shoot, and you look back. It's like, "Oh,
Somebody
he's
else.
dead now," right? Like somebody else got to get the, or I get the radio, right? And so to know that like, oh, someone's coming here, they're coming from Drayton Valley, they've been teaching in the district for 20 plus years, like, okay, like this should be good, right? Someone I can ask questions off of. And you've been wonderful, right? You've been
Yeah.
there just to answer questions and to provide that kind of like, I mean, here we don't really have departments here, right? We kind of do, we kind of don't, right?
Yeah.
And social studies has always been a small department, right?
Hmm.
Two people kind of full time or ish,
Right.
whatever, and then a third person kind of teaching. So even just recently, right, I was asking you about that student situation. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, like, I'm getting one message here and this is kind of what I want to do. Like, what are your thoughts on this? And just to have that, like, strength in numbers kind of feeling that, like, okay, like I have a colleague here is very experienced, is what he's saying. And that was kind of my first instinct as well. Or I was leaning towards that to verify that, like, okay, that is what we should be doing. To have that support has been great. So,
Yeah.
thank you for that over the last two
Well,
years.
again, you don't underestimate your abilities as well,
Hmm.
because when you read the room after the tragedy and you
Hmm.
gauge that, that's a sign of mastery. It's not just the
Hmm.
material, right? It's understanding what could be introduced versus what probably is not
Hmm.
appropriate for that. So, good for you. And again, right, stay curious.
Hmm.
That's the best thing I can say. Stay curious, right? Because
Hmm.
that'll hopefully see you through the next, right, few decades, a couple of decades, right,
However
depending on
long,
how
yeah,
long it takes.
yeah,
But yeah, absolutely, stay in touch.
we
Right,
for
maybe I'll
sure,
have you on my podcast once you have right
yeah,
that up
yeah,
and
yeah.
going.
Well, I
Yeah.
was telling kids, they're all like, "Mr. Kawaji, you can't leave, you can't go." I said, "Hey, well, kids, you know what? On the bright side, Mr. Olson's retiring after next year, so there is a possibility. We'll see." And
Yeah,
you have your schedule for next year.
I do, but Mandy said it could change. But
Do
yeah,
you got two sections of 30-2, or just
no,
one?
there's just 30-1 and a 30-2 class.
Okay,
Right,
yeah,
30-1
okay,
first semester, 30-2 second semester.
okay, okay. Yeah, you'll have an interesting bit,
Yeah,
and
and have three 20-1s, one first semester, two second semester, and I have a 20-2 second semester. So, right, as it stands right now. So just social, no electives.
I guess you are the social studies department next year then, okay. Because you're
Yeah.
basically teaching all the grade 11s and all the grade 12s.
Yeah, no tens, right? Just 1-9 class, so there'll be right somebody who'll be at that level.
Yeah, someone's gonna have to take care of
Yeah,
2 to 3 9 classes and
yeah. And I've
two
given
to three.
Lauren, Miss Malacca, right, some material as well because he's
Hmm.
got, I think,
Or is he teaching
yeah,
social
he's
next
in, I
year?
think, social 9, so I threw
Okay.
him my stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's gonna be interesting next year, kids. That's all I'll say.
yeah.
Okay. Well,
All right.
thank you. I wish you the
Yep.
best
Thank you
next
very
year and
much.
then, onwards to
Yep.
retirement.
Absolutely. Best luck to you next year.
Thank you.
And again, just because you're in Edmonton does not mean you can't, right, sort of again
Absolutely.
connect. And
Absolutely.
you find something. Remember, when I went to
Yeah.
White Ave and went to that kind of talk. If you know
Yeah.
anything else like that comes your way, and you say, "Hey, Randy, you want to come for a coffee and
Hey, anytime you want to
discussion?"
grab a coffee in Edmonton, let
Yep,
me know.
you
Yeah.
bet. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.